The music was loud enough to make the crystal glasses tremble slightly on the kitchen island, but not loud enough to drown the words that changed Ethan Caldwell's life forever. The house was full. Laughter floated through the rooms like smoke. People weaving between the living room and the back patio with drinks in their hands, congratulating Ethan on the promotion that had finally given him the life he'd promised his wife 8 years earlier. Their house, their celebration, their friends. Ethan stood near the bar counter, finishing a conversation with a colleague, when he heard the shout. "Yes, we're sleeping together." The voice sliced through the noise like broken glass. Every sound in the room seemed to collapse into silence. Ethan turned slowly. Across the living room, standing near the staircase, was his wife, Clara. Her cheeks were flushed, a half-empty glass of wine still in her hand, her eyes burning with the reckless confidence of someone who had already decided to burn the bridge behind them. Beside her stood Adrian Wolfe. Ethan knew him well, too well. Adrian had been coming to their house for 2 years, a friend from Clara's design firm, charming, confident, the kind of man who filled a room without trying. The kind of man Ethan had once trusted enough to hand a drink and say, "Make yourself at home." Now Clara pointed straight at Ethan. "Yes," she said again, louder this time, her voice echoing across the stunned room. "We're sleeping together. He's better than you." Someone near the couch gasped. Someone else whispered something Ethan couldn't hear, but Clara wasn't finished. "If you have any pride left," she said coldly, "you should leave." The silence that followed felt heavier than the words themselves. For a moment, Ethan didn't move. His mind was strangely calm, not numb, just clear. 8 years of marriage, the late nights building his career, the vacations he postponed, the quiet belief that everything he was doing was building something permanent. And now it all stood in front of him like a house with the foundation ripped out. He looked around the room. Friends avoided his eyes. Some looked shocked. Others looked embarrassed. Adrian didn't say a word. He just stood there, one hand resting casually in his pocket, wearing the faintest smile of someone who believed he had already won. Ethan studied Clara's face. Once he would have fought. Once he would have demanded explanations. But something about the way she looked at him now, like he was an inconvenience that had finally been dealt with, made the decision easier than he expected. He placed his glass down carefully on the counter. Then he walked forward. The room parted for him as he crossed it slowly, the quiet footsteps louder than the music ever was. When he reached the front door, he stopped, not to argue, not to plead, just to look back once. Clara stood exactly where she had been, her chin lifted slightly, as if daring him to make a scene. Ethan said nothing. He opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind him. The cool night air wrapped around him like a shock after the suffocating heat of the party. Inside the house, the music started again. Someone laughed nervously. The party continued. But Ethan Caldwell walked down the driveway, knowing something none of them did. The house they were celebrating tonight wasn't really Clara's. And by morning, everything she thought she owned, her comfort, her reputation, her future, would begin slipping through her fingers one quiet piece at a time. Not because Ethan planned revenge, but because sometimes the truth, once exposed, has a way of destroying far more than the lie that hid it. Ethan reached his car and paused, staring back at the glowing windows of the home he had spent years building. Inside those walls were memories, arguments, dreams, promises, and now betrayal. He slid into the driver's seat slowly, gripping the steering wheel as the reality settled in. There was something Clara didn't understand yet. Something Adrian definitely didn't. Ethan Caldwell had just walked away from the only thing holding their entire world together, and neither of them had any idea how quickly that world was about to collapse. Ethan drove for nearly 20 minutes before he realized he had no destination in mind. The streets were quiet, washed in the soft orange glow of streetlights, but his mind replayed the same moment over and over again. Clara's voice echoing to the living room. The stunned silence of their friends, Adrian standing there like a man who had just claimed a prize. Strangely, the pain came in waves, but beneath it there was something steadier, a quiet certainty, not anger, not revenge, just clarity. He pulled into a nearly empty parking lot overlooking the river and shut off the engine. The city lights shimmered across the water, and for the first time since leaving the house, he exhaled slowly. For 8 years, Ethan had built his life around stability. He believed in loyalty, in patience, in the idea that if you kept your promises, the people around you would keep theirs. But tonight had stripped that illusion away. And sometimes he realized losing an illusion was the only way to see the truth. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. He didn't need to check to know who it was. But eventually he looked. 6 missed calls, 3 messages, all from Clara. The first was short. "Where did you go?" The second sounded more irritated. "You embarrassed me tonight. Come back so we can talk." The third was different. "Ethan, something weird just happened." He stared at the screen for a moment before locking the phone again. By the time Clara sent that last message, the first domino had probably already fallen. Because while everyone at the party believed Ethan had simply walked away from his own home, the truth was a little more complicated. 2 years earlier, when Clara insisted they move into the large modern house on Hawthorne Ridge, Ethan had agreed, but with one condition. The property would be purchased through a holding company he had quietly created for his consulting work. On paper, the house wasn't owned by Ethan Caldwell, and it certainly wasn't owned by Clara. It belonged to Caldwell Strategic Holdings, a company where Ethan was the only listed director. At the time, it had been nothing more than a financial precaution, a smart way to manage taxes and investments. But tonight, it had become something else entirely. Across the river, inside the brightly lit house, Clara's evening was unraveling much faster than she expected. It started with a knock at the door, not the polite kind, a firm, professional one. Adrian had been the one to answer it, still enjoying the attention of a few lingering guests. Standing on the porch were 2 men in dark suits and a woman holding a tablet. One of them introduced himself calmly. "Good evening. We're representatives from Caldwell Strategic Holdings." At first, Clara didn't understand what they meant. Then the man continued. "We're here regarding the property lease agreement." The room slowly quieted again. "Lease," Clara repeated, confused. The woman on the tablet glanced down briefly. "Yes, the residence is leased under a conditional occupancy agreement tied to Mr. Ethan Caldwell." Adrian frowned. "What does that mean?" The man's tone never changed. "It means Mr. Caldwell has terminated the occupancy clause." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Clara laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous. This is my house." But the woman simply turned the tablet toward her. The document on the screen carried Ethan's signature and the timestamp, 30 minutes earlier. The man spoke gently but firmly. "You have until noon tomorrow to vacate the property." The silence that followed was heavier than the one before Ethan had walked out. Clara's face drained of color. Around her, guests began gathering their coats quietly, the energy of the party collapsing into awkward whispers. Adrian looked suddenly less confident. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. But Clara already knew the answer. For the first time that night, she realized something that hadn't occurred to her while she stood on the staircase humiliating her husband. Ethan had never raised his voice, never made a scene, never begged. He had simply left. And in doing so, he had taken everything that truly mattered with him. Hours later, as Ethan sat in his car watching the slow movement of the river, his phone buzzed one final time. A message from Clara. Just 3 words. "Please come back." Ethan stared at the screen for a long time before setting the phone aside. Some things, once broken in front of a room full of people, could never be repaired. And tonight, Clara hadn't just ended a marriage. She had destroyed the only person who had ever quietly held her entire world together.